around the district. It's been extremely important. As I've mentioned on several occasions now, our task force included over 70 different people on the task force, and these task force were broken down, and we tried to really think about personality, strengths, experiences, and put all those people together on those teams that could provide us with the best information possible so that we can make the best decisions for our school district. So as I mentioned previously, when we started this process back in June, my first statement to the entire task force, to our uh, group of people who were also leading the teams, has been from the very beginning that our goal was to start in a traditional model, and we would work from that mindset moving forward. But we also wanted to be prepared for not only the 5-day traditional with some safety precautions, but we also wanted to be prepared for the hybrid model, and then also the virtual learning or the remote learning model as well too. We recognized from the very beginning how challenging the hybrid model would be. Thinking about childcare issues, thinking about the mix of both in-person learning and also virtual learning from home. That's extremely challenging to think about, all those factors involved in that. With that, the hybrid model did provide us with the greatest possibility of meeting some of the standards and expectations from the CDC, whether it was social distancing, just keeping our kids safe on the school buses has been a concern with that. But also, we recognize that the hybrid model was important because of the connection with the teachers. The virtual learning option obviously was how we finished the school year out, and the most restrictive for our students and families, and the most challenging for our staff as well too. Recognizing that all of us are trained to be in-person educators. We've been teachers and principals and coaches, and working in close relationship with students in person has been, kind of our greatest strengths. And I would say the virtual learning is something new for all of us that we've had to kind of press into and really learn and grow. So these were the three planning scenarios as we started and worked through the course of the summer. So as all of you know by now, Wednesday night we had the education committee meeting, and Thursday night our school board voted on our plan. And the first 4 weeks of school are going to be in remote, virtual, 100% virtual model. We also pushed back the start date to the school year till September 8th. This is going to give our staff time to prepare and be ready and receive professional development. This is also going to give our families time to work out some of the childcare challenges and other things that need to be worked out. We also are hitting the pause button on the Titan Cyber Academy, and that will be deferred until we transition into the hybrid learning model. One of the other things that is pretty considerable at this time is that we are moving towards a one-to-one iPad, student-to-student iPad initiative for the entire district. So that's significant. As many of you know, previously, our one-to-one initiative was grades 7 through 12. Because of this pandemic and the challenges with the virtual model, we are pushing this down into the elementary and the primary world, and we are working towards a one-to-one environment for the entire district. This is a significant challenge for us as a school district, but we recognize the needs of our families, and we want our students to be equipped with whatever they need to be successful in this virtual model. Again, many wondered about why do we still need to have a commitment form based on parents' decision about how they're going to proceed through the school year. And again, we need these commitment forms because our hope and expectation is that we will be transitioning into a hybrid model in 4 weeks, as the date is shown above, October 9th. That's our hope and our desire based on the current conditions with the COVID-19 in Allegheny County in the state of Pennsylvania. But again, that's our hope. And so we still need to gather that information and be prepared when that time comes, so that we know transportation needs, we know the desires of our families and our students, and what model they would like to continue in, whether it would be the hybrid or the 100% virtual. Again, that due date is the 13th, this week, Thursday, the 13th. Many have asked questions about this concern. I've talked to many parents over the phone over the last week or so, and there's a lot of questions around this and what it's going to look like and why the transition and what, um, you know, what's the difference between, Titan Cyber Academy and our regular remote or virtual learning. And we're going to address some of those questions within this presentation this morning, and hopefully be able to answer many of the questions that are out there. So the big question is why are we starting the school year 100% virtual? We recognize that the counties and states across the country are all doing different things. You could read one report one day and see one answer. Allegheny County is split. We have a lot of districts in Allegheny County that are starting hybrid. We have a lot of districts in Allegheny that are starting remote or virtual. And then we have some districts in Allegheny County that are pushing for some faction or some areas where they would look at a 5-day instructional, more of a traditional model. So I know that the question is why are we starting in this virtual learning platform? And I think again, um, our concern, our greatest concern, is the health, safety, and well-being of our entire school and community. That is our biggest concern, and that is the main reason why we are starting in the virtual model. Again, the criteria from the CDC, the Department of Health, and the Department of Education just continues to change. We're on weekly calls with the Allegheny County Health Department, and the issues around quarantining, the issue around social distancing, contact tracing, isolation are becoming increasingly complex. And we recognize that we cannot possibly ensure the safety and well-being of our 4,200 students, even in a hybrid model. We can't assure that. And we think that the safest option, because of all of this, is to start in this remote, virtual, 100% virtual environment. This allows our staff to really focus in on improving and making the adjustments from the spring. We have a slide later on where we're going to talk about the marked improvements and the expectations that we have around virtual learning this fall, especially in these first 4 weeks. And I think that you're going to see something completely different from the spring to the fall. And we got thrust into a situation that was unexpected back in the spring, and now we're looking forward to transitioning and making sure that we are meeting the needs of our students and families in this virtual setting. So some may ask the question, what's going to be different? In the spring of 2020, there was, just everything was thrust upon us. We went from saying on probably March 11th or 12th that this could happen, and then seeing states like Maryland and Ohio make decisions, and then having the state of Pennsylvania say, no, it would be a local decision, and then the state of Pennsylvania coming in and shutting down schools temporarily at first, and then moving towards the school closure. Our focus, for much of the early stages, was just about meeting the needs of our community with technology, food, thinking about instruction and giving students some instruction, for the remainder of that school year and finishing out that time so it wasn't completely lost. The primary focus was on asynchronous learning. I know some of the questions and concerns that we've been answering is around synchronous and asynchronous, and we have a slide that we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. Are we going to use Zoom? Are we going to use Google Meet? Are we going to use these tools? And the answer to those questions is yes. We also recognize that our schedules in March, April, and May were unstructured, and there was so much uncertainty in families. we really felt the need to just kind of hit the pause button and really listen to our families and think about ways that we could help them during this difficult time. We also modified our grading policy. And we also recognized that across the board, there was an inconsistent learning management system. And, some teachers were using Google Classroom, other teachers were not. Some teachers were using different strategies across the board, and that made it very challenging for our families and for our students. This fall in 2020, starting the month in September into early October, we're looking to refine and enhance the learning opportunities based on the best practices for our students in this type of environment. As I mentioned, we want to enhance the asynchronous and synchronous learning opportunities. We're working with some experts in the field, professional development for our staff members, and we want to equip our staff with the tools that they need to be successful so that they can meet the needs of our students. Again, I know this next piece has been something that's been very important. We're going to try to follow the school day and school hours as much as possible. We recognize that this does not work for some families, and we will have these lessons recorded so that students can do anytime learning. If a parent and a student is not able to log on at 9 o'clock in the morning because of a childcare concern or something of that nature, we are going to make sure that these lessons are recorded so that the families can go in when it's convenient for them. Our goal is to follow the schedule as closely as possible, but we also recognize that this is not conducive for every single family. We are making sure that we have grades, tests, assessments. We're going to follow the board policy 213. We think it's so important to challenge students in a robust and rigorous environment, understanding also at the same time the conditions and how different this is for everybody. So there is some flexibility there, but we want there to be accountability and expectation as well too. That's extremely important for us, especially looking at some of our youngest learners all the way up through our high school students, is to make sure that there's an expectation that this is not busy work, that this is meaningful instruction, this is relevant learning, and this is not going to be a gap in time where students are losing instruction and learning. The last piece that I wanted to mention just before we flip over is just once again, this one-to-one learning environment, K to 12, and a consistent Google Classroom learning management system. These are important, and there's going to be accountability across the board for our staff and for the expectations that we have for our students. Again, we want this to be as smooth as possible for our students and families, and we recognize that having some structure would be very helpful. Dr. O'Black is going to explain the difference because there's been a lot of questions about synchronous and asynchronous instruction.
Thank you, Mr. Aiken, and good morning, everybody. We just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page in terms of the key terms for virtual learning. We talk a lot about synchronous versus asynchronous, and we wanted to take an opportunity just to share some of the highlights of each of those models. And it's important to understand that in an online virtual environment, such as the way that we are starting the school year, that we find a balance between synchronous and asynchronous learning, especially due to the nature of the times that we are working in right now. And as Mr. Aiken alluded to, some of the dynamics that we have going on in families relative to childcare, where students may be actually working during the day. So there needs to be, flexibility and lesson design that has opportunities for both synchronous and asynchronous. So on the left-hand side of your screen, synchronous, the easiest way to kind of wrap our arms around that is students learn at the same time. And, synchronous instruction, communication happens in real time. So this would be an opportunity where our teachers would be engaging with your children via a Zoom meeting or a Google Meets or other approved platforms. It does have the ability to be more engaging and effective. So students and teachers have the ability to have that conversation back and forth. Students would be able to ask questions real time, and teachers would be able to quickly reassess what they're teaching based on some formative and summative assessments that may be happening during the course of that instruction. And then finally, it allows for some instant feedback and clarification, again, based on how specific students are responding to questions or an activity that may be done during the synchronous model. In an asynchronous learning environment, and very much of this was what we experienced in the spring, students can learn at very different times. And again, we do understand that in many households, this will be important. So as Mr. Aiken indicated, even in a synchronous environment where it is live, we are going to be asking our teachers to record those lessons so that you as families are able to watch them at a time that is convenient for you, or in the event that a student had to go back and rewatch so that they would be able to remediate or be retaught from that live session, they would have the ability to do that. Again, it is more convenient, it's more flexible. We understand that families are all engaging, learning at a very different time, and it allows students to work at their own pace. So if there is a particular concept or skill that an individual student is struggling with, they can work through that at a slower, more manageable pace in the asynchronous learning environment. In some examples of this that we even saw in the spring was email, screencasts, Flipgrids, video, blog posts, discussion boards, things of that nature. So again, asynchronous, not being tied to any specific time of day.
One of the things that I'd like to add to that, what Dr. Black just shared, and our principals, especially at the primary level, have really talked about the importance of morning meetings and those daily connections with our teachers. We recognize how important those relationships are with our teachers and students. We recognize how important that is for the mental health, the social and emotional needs. This has been an extremely difficult time for all of us, and we recognize that on March 13th, our families, basically that relationship between the teachers and the students at that time was drastically different. And that normal everyday occurrence of the interactions with school and teachers, which is so important to the developmental just the mindset and overall well-being of our students had really been altered significantly. So we've been thinking a lot about this, and we've given considerable thought, even at the on our task force. Really devoted, one of the task force groups devoted a tremendous amount of time to the social and emotional well-being, and just meeting the needs of our students during this difficult time, even when we're disconnected. We think it's critically important that our teachers, our counselors, our social workers, our principals, everyone in the district is kind of pressing in and creating as many positive contacts as possible with our students. This is so important. We recognize it. It's important in traditional settings, and I think it's become increasingly important during this remote virtual setting. Um, Again, some of the things that we've talked about over the last few weeks of what we're committed to. You'll see a number of different items on this slide here. So the social and emotional piece is the one that I just talked about. Consistent curriculum taught by our teachers. Toggling back and forth, whether we're in the virtual situation at the beginning of the year, then the hybrid, and then traditional, or if there was emergencies later in the year and we needed to move back into a hybrid or back into a virtual, we want those transitions to be as seamless as possible. We understand that nothing's going to be perfect, but we want to work towards that. That's our goal. Another piece we've got a slide on that I'm going to just talk about in a few minutes is just the support services. Students with IEPs, 504, students with GIEPs, meeting the individual needs of our student. It may look a little bit different in a virtual environment, but our goal and our desire is to still meet the needs of all of our students even in this virtual environment. And we're going to do everything that we possibly can do to do that. School counselors are extremely important in this process. They have tremendous relationships with our students and our families. It's going to be important that they bridge the gap and really just serve as another connection piece, another communication piece with our families. The other expectation is really around high levels of engagement. We don't want this to be lost instructional time. We want the instruction to be engaging. We don't want busy work. We want projects. We want research. We want students to engage with meaningful instruction. Thinking about this at the lowest level, kindergarten and first grade. I've been talking about this a lot in my own personal situation as my oldest daughter just got hired as a first grade teacher, and she is going to be teaching in another school district in Allegheny County, first grade in a remote environment, her first year teaching. How difficult that is. How do you engage with students in that environment? How do you meet the needs? How do you create instruction that is relevant and doesn't just push busy work or just do this? How do we do formative assessment and check for understanding? How do we do summative assessment and have meaningful tests and quizzes? These are all the questions that we're asking, and our desire is to provide the very best product that we can provide for our families. Again, thinking about best practices, best instructional practices, doing professional development, webinar. Our teachers have grown a lot since this spring. There's no way to compare where they were back in March to where they're going to be in the month of September. They have received professional development. They've grown on their own. They understand this a little bit better than they did back then. And so we expect that the best practices are going to be utilized. Again, back to, you'll see the bottom, is these transitions are difficult. Whether we're in virtual or hybrid or traditional, we're going to meet the needs of our students and our families across the board. So this is thinking about one of the challenges that we talked with our principals about and talked with our families about is really about what to expect. You know, what does a day in the life of a virtual student or a virtual school day look like? And we want to continue to work this out, and to the point where it is understood by parents, understood by students, understood by teachers, the expectations and the rhythms and the flow of a school day in a virtual environment. Again, we talked a little bit about having some structure, 9 a.m. to 3:30, thinking about our students and thinking about how they will engage in learning throughout the course of the day. What's the appropriate amount of screen time? I think that's something that's critical. I think all of us through these last 5 months or so have spent way too much time on computers, whether it's an iPad, a laptop, Zoom meetings, whatever. So we want to have a balance, especially thinking about our youngest learners. And they need to be tactile learners. They need to have their hands on. They need to be touching things and learning from touch and feel and more of a tactile learning environment. So we're going to try our very best to create those types of environments for our students, even in the virtual setting. As Dr. O'Black said, there may be some synchronous and asynchronous live lessons and asynchronous options. One of the nice things about the asynchronous option is that you can go back and watch a lesson multiple times so that you have a deeper understanding of what is being taught. That's something that could be very helpful for our students and families. Again, our teachers will be engaging with students, calling on them to participate, having meaningful contact with our teachers and students in a classroom environment, albeit virtually. I think that's a challenge, but I think that we're up for this challenge and we're going to do our very best. As I mentioned before, the live lessons being recorded will help our families that are in situations where maybe the student can't log in at 9 o'clock. Maybe the parent is working at that time and they want to do that work at 3:30 or 4:30 or 5 o'clock or in the evening. So we want to have some flexibility to this as well. Again, Google Classroom is going to be the hub for all of our students and staff and all of our families. And that is going to be where our staff is posting work and communicating on a regular basis with our families. So the next question is, what happens following the district-wide 100% virtual learning model? In October, how do we transition? What does the hybrid, one of the most frequently asked questions that I've answered in the past month is, what is hybrid school? What does it consist of? And again, as some of you may recall, and we've received many questions in our FAQ on this too, is we had broken down students into different cohorts. Monday, Tuesday cohort, alphabetized. We have a Thursday, Friday cohort, alphabetized student cohort B. The expectation is that students would engage in-person instruction during those days, and then they would have virtual learning the other 3 days per week. Once again, we recognize that this is not the most ideal setting. The most ideal setting for all of us is the traditional 5-day model, but here's just a visual representation of what that 3-student cohort would look like. You have your 2 students starting, or 2 days starting on Monday and Tuesday, and then you have your cohort B on Thursday and Friday. And then you have all the computer screens in just to kind of signify a remote or virtual learning option. Again, this is challenging to think about in the hybrid model, all the contact tracing, the quarantining, if outbreaks are to happen, what would that look like? And there's still some questions that we're working through with this model as well too. We were on a call this morning about this and really planning. So even though we're starting the school year in a virtual setting, our hope is to get into this hybrid model as soon as possible. And then at that time, we want to have answers and work through some of the logistics and questions and be prepared for that when that time comes. So one of the main questions that we receive is, what does a student do on remote days? And so we just identified a few things. That once again, there would be a predetermined schedule. There would be weekly lesson plans and instructional videos and different things on the teacher's Google Classroom. There would be projects and problem-based learning and things that would be applicable for learning. We would expect students to be engaging in synchronous and asynchronous instruction on these remote learning days. Once again, utilizing Google Classroom, Google Meet, and Zoom and other web-based systems. Again, we also expect that there is going to be some independent learning work from our students during these days as well. And I think it's important to note too that teachers would continue to engage with students throughout the course of the week in consultation hours. We recognize that those contacts and that communication are extremely important, and those continued connections. Dr. O'Black is going to spend a few minutes talking about Titan Cyber Academy. There's been a lot of questions about the Titan Cyber Academy and what that would look like, and he's going to share a few slides on this.
Thank you, Mr. Aiken. Again, we have gotten some questions regarding the Titan Cyber Academy. And just to reiterate, the Academy is for students who opt to remain home 100% of the day following the district's return to the hybrid learning model. So again, this will be similar to those first 4 weeks of school where students will engage in synchronous and asynchronous learning via our learning management system, and they would do that 5 days a week. This learning would occur and be hosted in our Google Classroom. So again, similar to what students are experiencing in those first 4 weeks of school. And it would allow for that curriculum to be taught by our teachers. That consistency will help allow our students to move between virtual, hybrid, and traditional seamlessly. It's important to note that we are planning that there may be instances that arise that a student starts back in a hybrid learning model, but for some very specific scenarios may have to transition into a 100% virtual model. And we want to make sure that to the fullest extent possible, that the curriculum and instruction that the students are receiving is seamless. Again, looking at the support services, students will have modified and adapted curriculum based on IEP 504 and our gifted and talented students. And even in the 100% virtual environment, our students will continue to have consultations, lessons, and our virtual students. We are intending these classes to have high levels of engagement with our staff and administration, so that they're able to connect with students daily, understanding, how important these relationships are, particularly because, we won't be seeing these students those 2 days a week that we would be
Turn
seeing
the stuff off.
are in the hybrid model. And then finally, a lot of parents will ask, what is the advantage to enrolling in the Titan Cyber Academy versus other cyber schools or cyber charter schools that may be available? And one of the most important points, besides continuing to engage with our curriculum, with our teachers, and that continuity of education, is that students are eligible to participate in Shaler area clubs and activities. And if they are a senior and they meet all of the required graduation requirements, those students would receive a Shaler area high school diploma. So just concluding this slide, our district intends to offer a full complement of courses in our Cyber Academy to the extent possible. We have fielded a lot of questions about, course offerings, advanced placement, college and high school, music courses and things of that nature. We are working through all of those scenarios, and that's really important to us to be able to offer the courses that our students have really come to know and expect in our programs. And that's also why it's very important that the commitment survey be completed if you are at all considering the full 100% virtual when the district transitions to hybrid, because it really allows us to look at what our demands for hybrid and virtual are, as it really does come down to a course by course scheduling. So that's very, very important. And if needed, we do have existing partnerships with outside course providers that are able to provide courses to us on an as needed basis. Again, our hope is that we can continue to have our Shaler area teachers do those, but in a case-by-case basis, if we've got to work with a third-party provider, we do have that opportunity as well. The asynchronous component for Titan Cyber students occur during identified periods or on Wednesdays. Again, if back to what Mr. Aiken was talking about, the hybrid model, all students are online that day. So that does provide a consistent day each week that our teachers will be able to, for a portion of their day, connect with students. And then it's also important to note when a teacher is dedicated to both hybrid and the Cyber Academy, that live instruction may vary because 4 days a week, those teachers will have students in front of them in that hybrid return to school model. All textbooks, technologies, and other necessary materials are provided by the district, and parents seeking additional information regarding this option can contact their school principal, and they'll work with us in order to make certain that we're able to answer any specific questions that you may have regarding this option. And the Titan Cyber Academy is available to students K through 12.
So as I talked a little bit about this in an earlier slide, we get a number of questions, and this was challenging back in the spring. We want, in the virtual environment, our goal is to meet the needs of our students with special needs, our students with a GIEP, across the board, students with related services, OT, PT, speech. Our paraprofessionals are going to be pressing in and working with our teachers and our students. So across the board, we recognize how challenging this can be in a virtual environment. And so we're going to have to really work at meeting the needs of our students, specifically the students with special needs. But again, our expectation is that we will do that. We will, provide accommodations and modifications when necessary. We'll meet in a small group environment. We will, have that opportunity to connect with and teach and reteach lessons. Those are extremely important needs, and we recognize that these are some of the major concerns that parents have about this virtual environment. Um, as I talked extensively about earlier, the social and emotional needs, this has been very difficult. If our students were coming back on August 25th, that would have been 5.5 months out of school. If when our students come back on October 9th, that will have been probably close to 7 months out of school. So we recognize that amount of time out of school, there's significant anxiety, there's challenges. We care about our students. We recognize their needs. We are pressing in with our counselors and our social workers and other resources that are available to our students and our families. And we are going to do our very best to meet the needs of our students across the board. So this is a very important slide to us. We also recognize there's students with 504 plans and thinking about, whether it's a medical issue, whatever that issue may be that requires a 504 plan. We're going to do everything that we can to meet those needs of our students during this virtual learning platform. So this is an important slide, and I think many of our parents have questions about this and how will this look and what will the accommodations be, and it may be a little bit different than it would if it was face to face or in person. But again, we're going to do our very best to meet those needs and recognize that it's going to be a challenge along the way. But our students' needs are at the forefront, along with the safety of all of our students. So over the coming weeks, this is a slide that we've been working on. There's going to be some orientation. So even though we're starting in a virtual environment, we want to create opportunities for our students and our teachers to meet before the first day of school on September 8th. So we're going to be creating schedules for this and looking for opportunities to give resources, materials, supplies. Uh, we want there to be some training for our families around Google Classroom and how do what are the best, um, practices in a virtual environment, some technology training. We recognize that these connection points at the beginning of the year, especially for our K-1 students, are so important. And so our principals are going to be working on creating these opportunities for our families to come in, pick up the materials and resources that they need, technology, and then have an opportunity to meet their teacher before the first day of the school year. Food service, another thing that we've been discussing, similar to the spring, we will still be serving our families both breakfast and lunch. And we're working out the details for this. The locations and times for this have not been determined just yet. We had a meeting on Thursday to talk about possible options and continue to look for this information to be shared on the district website. We also want there to be additional Zoom meetings and questions and concerns that could be answered as we get further along in this process. In the coming weeks, our principals are going to have additional Zoom meetings where they'll be able to answer specific questions related to, some of the concerns that arise. That's going to be important for the details of this plan. Today, we provide a lot of high-level detail of what our expectations are, but in the coming weeks, our principals are going to be having Zoom meetings and can answer questions related to the specifics of the plan. Again, our principals are great resources. We encourage you. I know we've answered a lot of questions. They've answered a lot of questions. Please continue to reach out to us and we'll do our very best to answer all your questions and really get ready for the start of this virtual school year. Dr. Black, you were going to review kind of the Q&A session with our families before we get started.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Aiken. Using the participant window in the Zoom meeting, if you do have questions that you would like to direct to the administration, if you could please raise your hand. Once you've raised your hand, I will recognize you based on the screen name that you've signed into Zoom with, and then you will have the opportunity to unmute yourself and state your name. Just as a reminder, individual questions that are personal in nature should be directed to your building principal or the appropriate department. We don't want to speak specifically about individual students and citing individual students' name in this online forum. We are going to ask that you limit your comments today just to 3 minutes so that we're able to address as many comments as possible. Okay, our first comment is from Sarah Shuley.
Hi, I have just 2 quick questions and 1 comment. First of all, will the curriculum include instruction on how to use these electronic devices? Because there wasn't a whole lot of that at the end of the last year.
Yes, we actually hope that we can do, we are planning to do a technology training at the end of this month or early September. And so our goal is to, provide instruction for both our students and our parents at that time so that they'll know how to access Google Classroom and everything that they'll need to do on the iPad.
Great, thank you. Next, for specials, is that going to be graded? I'm just curious about specials. Nothing was mentioned about that.
Yeah, and that would be one of the questions that we're going to get down into a little bit more of the details when you meet with your principals in the coming weeks. Our goal is to provide specials instruction and regular, course instruction, whether it's the core content. So yes, we want to provide as normal possible day as possible, even in a virtual environment. So when the principals are able to work with our parents in those meetings, they'll talk a little bit more specifically about what some of those special classes may look like.
Great, thank you. And my last comment, I would just like to suggest that if possible, teachers would give the lesson plans, not just for the week on Monday morning, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe on Saturday, just so parents can kind of plan out for the week in case, kids have to go to different, parents' houses or they have to go somewhere else, just to kind of give us a little bit of time to kind of plan for the week ahead.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry, I have a, I'm on the, just on the audio call, I'm not on the video Zoom meeting to do that. So I don't know if there was a special way I could ask any questions that way.
If you could state your name and ask your question, please.
Okay, this is Michelle Craig.
And what's your
I just had 3, I had 3 questions. One, so just if I understood earlier when you said that the students would be kind of expected to follow their normal daily routine from like 9 to 3, how would we, I guess, really engage a student that long on an iPad while kind of multitasking off the side of maybe our own desk if we're working?
Yeah, I don't think that there's any way that we would expect a student to be on an iPad for the 6 hours of that school day, 6.5 hours of that school day. So there is going to be some work that students are doing independently. Some of the resources that we talked about, whether it's art supplies or scissors or crayons or colored pencils or different, projects that they're working on. Some of that work is not going to be on the iPad. And so there's no way that we would expect a student to be engaged, especially at this K-3 level, on an iPad for that long.
Okay, and then my second question was, I know you said that we would be able to kind of go back in afterwards. So maybe if the parents are working all day, we could go back in, after we're done with work to try to review those lesson plans. I mean, is that something that is really going to be able to be done within a short period of time frame when a parent is done working before, dinner and bed and bath time routine?
I mean, that's our desire. And I've heard from a number of parents about really expressing the need for that, that what they're referring to as anytime learning, because for some parents, it just doesn't fit the routine. So again, our expectation is that we're going to make, we're going to be as flexible as we can possibly be with families, understanding that there's different needs across the board. So I think, understanding also that our primary students don't stay up until 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. So there's a limited window, we understand. So we just ask that parents do the best that they possibly can do given the current circumstances. And we'll work with you. I think that's the key, is we want our teachers to be flexible and responsive. And we want our families to feel like an educational partner in this matter.
Okay. And then my last question, when it comes to grading, and I know that, so my daughter's actually just entering kindergarten this year, so it's a little bit different. So I didn't know, is grading going to be the same as if they were in actual in-person classes versus doing this virtual? I don't know how that would even be possible if everyone's kind of learning differently, from different individuals. It's not, they have the same person necessarily providing the instruction. I mean, you could have mom, you can have babysitter, you can have dad, grandma, grandpa, that might not understand, necessarily everything that they would need to do in order to convey it to a student. So how would you grade everybody the same if everyone's learning differently?
Right. And again, this is going to require some flexibility, but we do have a grading policy, policy 213. And I realize that grading at the kindergarten level is also very different than it may be at the secondary level, at the middle school level, or at the elementary school level. So I would say that question probably can get into more specific detail whenever you meet with the principals and they're able to talk more extensively about what grading looks like at the kindergarten level. But we also understand that this is a very difficult situation, and students are going to be in childcare environments in different places where there may not be a parent there to assist them with an assignment. But again, our teachers are going to be working together with our families to, help them. We don't want these 4 weeks to be lost instructional time. And we recognize that our learning needs of our youngest students, are a little bit different. And they're challenging. Some of our students are coming into the environment in schools for the first time. Maybe this is, maybe they didn't have the chance or the opportunity to attend some type of preschool. So typically speaking, our kindergarten students range significantly anyway. And so this challenge up front with this virtual model is going to be even more challenging, more difficult. So we're going to be as flexible as we possibly can, and I'm sure that these kindergarten teachers, we have amazing kindergarten teachers across the board, and I'm sure that they'll do a great job transitioning our students in, even in a virtual environment.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Michelle.
Our next question is from Kelly Pantone.
Yeah, hi. So I just have a question regarding what is the difference between doing the hybrid now and the difference when starting in October? Like, do you guys not feel like you can social distance appropriately?
Yeah.
I'm just having trouble understanding what's the difference between now and in 4 weeks.
Sure. And we've been asked this question quite a bit. And when we started really thinking about the hybrid model and released that as a tentative plan back in the middle of July, we recognized at that time that there were significant hurdles and obstacles to overcome, specifically around social distancing. And I know, if you just cut things in half in a perfect world, right? You say, well, you have 24 kids in a class or 27 kids in a class or whatever. Now you have 13. Well, that's in a perfect world, yes. But classrooms were a concern. Hallways were a major concern. Food service, cafeteria was a huge concern. Cafeteria, and when you factor in all those different environments, whether students are transitioning, we did not feel, as we continued to discuss and plan, that we were going to be able to keep our students safe, even in that hybrid model. There were other concerns too, as far as like the quarantining, the social distancing, and the contact tracing that came up. Also, the consistency with instruction. And then back to what I said at the beginning too, we finished the school year in the most restrictive environment. And starting the school year in the most restrictive environment will allow us the opportunity to progress forward and not, I can't tell you the number of medical professionals that I've talked to in the past 2 weeks that have said to me, Sean, you want to do this hybrid, but you do understand that within a very short amount of time, you could very likely, in all likelihood, be back into a remote setting. And we just didn't think that toggling back and forth right at the beginning of the school year was the right way to start out the school year. And that's why we made the decision.
So,
Thinking about 4,200 students, 500 staff members, the health and safety and well-being of everyone really drove us to this decision.
yeah, so what are you guys doing to put in place that our kids can go to school in October? Because they do need to be in school, whether it's 2 days, whether it's 5 days.
Yeah, and we agree with you that we want our students to be in school, but we want them to be in school in the worst way, but we want them to be in school safe and healthy. And I think that, our buildings, our custodians have installed some equipment. Some of our practices and procedures and protocol are in place. So it really is just a matter of hopefully the numbers in Allegheny County continue to get better, and we can ensure that our students and staff are safe in that environment. So there are some measures as far as like the PPE equipment and masking and different things of that nature that we've purchased and installed. So yes, the school bus is still going to be a challenge, though. I'll be honest with you, because if we adhered to 6 feet of social distance on a school bus, we could probably only fit about 15 to 20 students on a school bus, if that. And we don't have, an extra 15 to 20 school buses to increase the fleet size of our school, of our busing fleet. So I think, yes, there are still going to be some challenges in October, but we will continue to work through those challenges because we recognize how important it is to get students back in to school in a safe manner. Thank you.
Dr. Black, can you explain how to do this raising hand thing? Sorry, I'm new to Zoom and I don't know what you're talking about.
If you'd like to, you could just ask your question, Gina.
Oh, okay, thank you. My name is Gina Day. My son's at Scott Primary. I just wanted to follow up on her question, talking to Dr. Aiken or Mr. Aiken about the safety. It sounds like you're saying that the janitorial staff has already started to include the safety, I'm not sure what you called it, PPE, into the buildings. And so you're also referencing the numbers in Allegheny County. So I just want to clarify, like when this 4 weeks is up, assuming, and you can't really assume a lot right now, but assuming the numbers aren't increasing, but perhaps they also haven't decreased, is there like an acceptable level of decreasing that you're waiting to get to? Or is the 4 weeks kind of like right now a hard date of like, that's what we're gonna strive for if the numbers haven't increased? I just needed clarification on that. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Gina. Again, I think that, some of what you've asked, we can't answer right now. our hope is that we'll be able to answer those questions and say, it's going to continue to get better. But right now in Allegheny County, we do not have a matrix. In some other states, they have a matrix that they've used. And we've pressed the Allegheny County health officials for this, and they actually shared with us on Thursday that they're actually working on a matrix for school districts and the county, the state to use. So we do not currently have a matrix. Obviously, we would want, the continued trend to be going downward with the number of cases in Allegheny County. We also recognize that, these 4 weeks could stretch into 6 weeks. But one of the other things that we want to do is we want, as I stated on Wednesday night, we want to communicate with parents on a weekly basis of kind of where we're at, how we're doing, and how things are going. So I can assure you this is that we're tracking this and working closely with the county officials, state officials as well. And we want to make sure that we do the right thing. We make the right decisions for our students and our families and our staff. And so we're going to be communicating out on a weekly basis to inform our parents of kind of where we're at and what we're moving towards as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gina.
Mr. Aiken.
Our next question is from Jay, Couey.
Hey, thank you very much. If you can hear me, my name is Jay Couey. I have two kids, one at Marzoff and one at Scott Elementary School. I'm following up on the same question that these earlier parents have asked, because it's been very clear to me from this meeting that you all are not taking directives from any particular source. And in fact, it seems like you're taking directives from a number of different sources and not actually making any decisions yourselves, but hiding behind the authority figures that you guys are blaming these decisions on. And so we would really like to know, the parents would really like to know who we need to call in order to persuade and change the opinions or the policies in Allegheny County, because clearly you guys are not the ones we need to talk to. And the vast majority of parents, as you know from the surveys that you sent out earlier this summer, the vast majority of the parents want their kids back in school. We want the teachers doing their job, and we want to get back to our normal lives. And since you're talking about cases, I would like to stress the fact that around the world, we have millions of numbers from different countries around the world. And you're not listening to a hillbilly. I'm actually a faculty member of the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. And I'm telling you that there are numbers around the world which indicate that flu is much more dangerous than COVID is for young people. And so what we're dealing with here is a false alarm for children, especially under the age of 12. You can look it up around the world. You can find different sources. So if you're interested in finding different sources, you as the leaders of Shaler Elementary and other schools could find those sources, but you're choosing not to. So if you could inform the parents as to who we need to talk to so that you can hide behind the right decisions, then we would like that very much. Thank you.
All right. Oh, yeah,
Jay.
love it.
Jay, just to respond, we certainly are not hiding behind. In fact, we've had to make this decision based on the information that we've looked at from the Allegheny County Health Department and the state of Pennsylvania. And
how many children are dying? How many children are hospitalized? That's the question you need to answer.
Jay, we gave you the opportunity to speak, and I thank you for sharing your concerns. And no one is questioning the credibility of your testimony today. But I can assure you, though, that we are not hiding behind any decision, and we've made decisions that are very difficult. It would be nice in the state of Pennsylvania to receive a strong recommendation or a directive from the state level, but that's not going to happen because the local school districts are responsible for this decision. And Governor Wolf has made it clear that he's made recommendations, but he's not going to make
He's an idiot.
So I think the other thing is school districts across Allegheny County have to take the information that they receive and to make the best decision or the right decision. And you've mentioned the survey that was done back in mid-June. And I would say that that survey was taken well before the the spike that we saw in the month of July. So you're right in a sense that right now we have not seen some of the data that supports some of the kids getting sick, or the mass numbers that we've seen from like the 20s or different things. But I would also caution you too that we also haven't had 1,400 students in a high school. We haven't had 700 students in a middle school. We haven't had close to 1,000 students at the elementary school. We haven't had close to 500 students at some of our primary schools, and a couple hundred at reserve primary.
There are a lot of parents waiting, so I think I should shut up. But Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, almost every country in Europe is open, and many of them didn't close their schools. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to talk.
Thank you, Jay.
The next comment comes from Matt Fitch, Fitch.
Hi, yes. I guess my question would be in regards to, are the teachers going to be available after the 3 o'clock workday? Because what it seems like to me, what's going on right now is that you're asking the parents to go to work on their full times and then come home and teach a second job, a teaching position for, however long this is going to last, for the 4-week period of time. Have you guys thought about, the repercussions from that? Have you thought about the grandparents are most likely going to be watching the kids who are most vulnerable while the two parents are at work? Did you guys put any consideration into that? And will we have access to the teachers after the 3 o'clock workday?
So the teachers do have a contracted time for work, but we also understand that this situation is very unique. And I know many of our teachers were working well into the evenings last spring. And I'm sure there's going to be many of our teachers that work after 3 o'clock or after 4 o'clock, depending on what grade level they teach. So what I would suggest, is just to share your questions that you may have with the staff members through their email or other forms of contact. And I think that our teachers will do a great job of responding and getting back to you when they receive those questions. I understand it may not be in real time. If you are working at 7 o'clock at night, that answer may not come immediately, or it may. It just depends on when teachers are available to respond. Again, we are expecting our staff to have consultation hours and be responsive to our parents during this time. We recognize that many situations have 2-parent families or single parents that are working, single parent families that are working. So this is a challenge. And yes, we've given much thought about that. And that's why, we've identified the consultation hours and ways that staff can be available to our families. When you have a question in the evening, I would just submit that question, and I think there has to be some flexibility with our staff too, with just kind of understanding, due dates and expectations that not every family is working from home from 9 o'clock till 3:30.
Well, that being said, wouldn't that be the school board's decision to kind of mandate something to where if a parent needs guidance, I mean, we're not teachers. So if a parent needs guidance later on in the evening after they finish their job, shouldn't there be some kind of mandated, you have to respond or answer a question? Because if not, I think our students are going to be left behind.
Yeah, we've been meeting regularly with our association, with the teachers union, and I think the cooperation has been tremendous. And I think there is going to be a lot of flexibility, but having mandated times that they answer questions from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. or something like that is not something that we've decided upon yet. But I think there is an expectation that teachers will be responsive and have been responsive into the evenings, understanding that different questions may arise from families in different situations.
Now, one last question. Now, will the kids be held back? Let's just say you talked about the teachers going to call on them and participate in classroom activities. Well, if that student's not available till after the 3 o'clock hour, how do they do that? That's kind of a concern to me.
Right. In that kind of environment where students are not able to join the synchronous instruction time during the day, that we'll have to, find other ways for those connections to take place. Not sure exactly what that would look like right now, but I will say that we recognize that not every family is going to be able to join synchronously during the day.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the vast majority. That's all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Aiken.
Thank you. The next comment we have is from Kimberly and Ryan Dixon. Is Kimberly and Ryan Dixon still on the line? Okay, our next question is from Sarah Loomis. Okay, our next question is from Christopher Bodel.
Hi, thank you. My name is Chris Bodel, and I have one starting.
Oh, hello, this is Sarah Loomis. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, Sarah, we can hear you.
We'll come back to you.
I'm
Sarah.
sorry. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I couldn't unmute myself.
Do you want me to keep going, or do you want Sarah to go?
No, go ahead, sir. You can go. Thank you.
All right. I have my daughter starting at Birchfield this upcoming fall, and I just had hopefully 3 quick questions. The first is, where can we? Is there a place that we can see what the bus routes are and like the expected drop-off time? Because we're having trouble filling out the commitment form specifically with respect to the buses to try and plan out that time frame.
Dr. Black, do you want to answer the transportation question?
Yes, Mr. Aiken. Bus schedules are continuing to be finalized. There is an email address if you are looking to get a specific time for the bus stop. And that email address is businfo@sasd.k12.pa.us.
All right, thank you. And I'm sorry if I missed this during your presentation, but because I know you said there's going to be follow-up meetings to meet teachers, but do we know when they're going to be assigned to their teachers?
Yeah, those they have not been, that information has not been released yet. But do we have a primary principal that could state when that information will be released?
Hi, this is Mr. Martinuska, Principal at Reserve Primary. Our secretaries are returning at the end of this week, and we'll be looking to finalize those rosters within the next week. We expect that information will get to parents probably the following week after next, so like the week of the sometime during the week of maybe the 24th or so. You can expect to get those rosters after then.
All right, thank you. And then my last question is just, do you have a specific, and I know that it's going to be constantly evolving and whatnot, but do you have a idea of at what point during those first 4 weeks of virtual you might be making a decision on whether the virtual will be extended or not? Just asking for setting up childcare purposes and whatnot, since it's right now just setting up for like a month and having to possibly extend that. So thank you.
Yeah. Chris, thank you. Our goal is to make that decision whether or not we'll extend or move into the hybrid as early as possible. We will provide weekly updates for our parents to make sure that they are staying connected and giving kind of real-time information. And again, we recognize that this is a very challenging situation for our families that require childcare, and we will do our very best to get that information out as quickly as possible in case that there is a need to extend.
Our next question is from Sarah Loomis.
Okay, hello?
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, okay, I have a question. My son is usually uses the resources within the Title I reading, and I know they usually do the testing for that within the first couple of weeks of schooling. How is that testing going to happen? And then how, and if he needs the resources, how is that going to be integrated into this online/hybrid?
Sarah, this would, I would kind of qualify as a very personal question related to Title I, but I also realize that there are probably some other parents on the call that may have children who receive Title I services as well. I'm just wondering if either Mr. Pelkoffer or Mr. Martinuska could actually speak to the Title I question. But again, this is information too that will be probably discussed within that next Zoom meeting with the building specifics.
Hi, this is Mr. Pelkoffer. We will have Title I, if we go virtually this year, we will have Title I services. Truthfully, I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't know if Mrs. Milligan is on the call here. She is running the Title I program. But that is some questions that we're going to have to resolve or figure out how we can do some assessments. We've had some discussions regarding that. Unfortunately, a final plan has not been determined. My thought would be is initially students that probably qualified last year may receive some services until the assessments are completed. But truthfully, I'm not 100% sure that that's going to happen. We do still want to work through that. But Title I teachers will be available. They will be working with students virtually. We're still discussing the assessment portion of this. We keep continually getting updates from the state and federal. So we have to follow those guidelines. And truthfully, they change very frequently. So as soon as we get a final plan, we will share that with our families.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Thanks, Sarah.
Our next question is from Jamie C.
Hi, my question is, so if after the first 4 weeks of all district virtual, if a student does the Titan Cyber Academy, would that then be for just the remaining 5 weeks of the semester? And then I guess I'm also just curious if then after that they're wanted to switch back to hybrid or whatever it's if it's more traditional at that point. What would that transition look like? Like, would they go back to the teacher that they had at the start of the school year, or I'm just not sure how it would work. So if you could clarify, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. And that is a question that we've received quite often in the past week. So one of the things that we're trying to do is make this as seamless as possible so that if a student starts off the school year, obviously everyone's starting off the school year in the virtual environment. But if a student stays in that virtual environment when we transition back to a hybrid or to a hybrid model on October 9th, if that family makes a decision at that time to continue on in a virtual environment after the end of the 9 weeks or so, if they want to make that transition, we're going to work with families to ensure that that happens. And we want to do so as seamlessly as possible. Recognizing that every time a student transitions, it's a little bit of a challenge, but we also want to be flexible. And so If a parent changes their mind midway through the year and decides that they want traditional or they want hybrid, we are more than willing to work with our families to make sure that that can happen. Again, our goal is to be flexible and to provide as seamless transition as possible for our students, depending on where the families are at with their decisions.
Nicole, are you still with us?
Yeah, that was it. I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Our next question is from Stacy Grana.
Hi, I have a quick question regarding the other surrounding school districts. I am personally focused on my child because she'll be going into first grade at Birchfield. And some other school districts seem to be doing K through third grade 5 days a week versus the virtual, given how young our children are. Has Shaler given any thought of possibly doing the same model as the other districts?
Yeah, Stacy, to be honest with you, back in June when we kicked off this whole task force group, and when I talked with the steering committee and then talked with the group at large, our goal was to start in a traditional model. We recognize that this is extremely difficult, especially for our K-3 population of students who need that guidance and are not as independent as far as independent learners go. And so we recognize how difficult this is for our students and families at this early age. However, I know there are a few districts that are still looking at that 5-day traditional environment for K-3 or K-5. And I honestly don't know how that they're going to socially distance and create that safe environment for all of the students. And that was our biggest concerns as we transitioned to the hybrid, and we're really focused on that as a tentative plan. We still had concerns about the social distance and being able to conduct that. So I want you to be sure that we want to get back to that traditional model as soon as we safely can. And we recognize how important it is for our youngest and most vulnerable learners, especially those K-1 students. The first grade students, their school year was cut short, back in March, and they had, an experience of really only 6.5 months in a school setting. And so we recognize that our first graders are going to need tremendous guidance as well, especially early on here. So yes, we did give it consideration, but we don't believe that it is the safest option for our students, and that's why we decided upon the virtual.
To that point, I just have one more question. Will the kids be going back a few weeks, even a few months to where they left off? So if kindergarten was cut short and they're going to first grade, will they be picking up like 4 months of kindergarten? How's that going to look?
I think it's important that our teachers kind of assess where our students are at and really teach them to where they're at. I think it's important reading some studies from different places where they've had, remediation involved. I think it's important that we don't overwhelm our students as they transition back to the school environment. And so I think it's critical that our teachers evaluate where our students are at and then teach to where they are and meet their needs in that way. Piling on remediation and, I think, it is not the best alternative for our students. And I think there's also a social and emotional piece too, as I've mentioned previously, that is critical as we transition students back as well. So yes, there's going to be some learning gaps. We understand that. But I think it's important that our students and our teachers work together to try to find out where the students are and then meet those needs and continue to move forward.
Okay, I know the time is up, but I'm sure many want to know this as well, but the assessments, are the teachers going to assess them within these 4 weeks period individually? If not, is this going to take place after the 4 weeks when we know that we could possibly be in a hybrid mode?
Stacy, that's a really challenging question. And I think in the coming weeks when our principals schedule their school specific meetings, I think there'll be more detail around kind of what instruction will look like and what assessments will be used during this virtual time period. Again, you know, some of those details are still being worked out. And as the Title I question earlier, you know, what will assessment look like and what's appropriate assessment for a K-1 student in this environment? So those are still some of the challenges that we're working through right now. And I would expect that within the coming weeks, when our principals host those school-specific meetings, they'll have more detailed information around assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Stacy.
Our next question is from Allison Edgerton.
Thank you. When talking about the Titan Cyber Academy, particularly after the 4-week virtual model, is the curriculum relatively the same as the hybrid? And who will be teaching it? Is it Shaler teachers or is it contracted employees?
So our goal is to have our Shaler area teachers teaching in that environment. So again, it's, you know, the details that we're still working through at this time. Our goal, especially at the primary level, is not to contract those services out to an outside organization, especially around some of the questions earlier around the seamless transitions. So we're still working out the details of what that would look like and who would be teaching. But again, we want there to be easy transitions for students when they decide to come back into the hybrid model or the traditional model.
Okay. And to piggyback off of that, we're coming up on the beginning of the school year. When do you think that decision would be made?
Well, we do know, especially at the primary elementary level, that we want our Shaler area teachers to be teaching in that environment. So we're not going to contract that work out at the K-6 level. Now, the details of what that would look like and how that would look are still being ironed out. So I would say within the coming weeks. Now, one of your follow-up questions would be, well, we need to make a commitment by Thursday about whether we're going to choose the Titan Cyber Academy. But just please understand that even if you select the Titan Cyber Academy or a hybrid model for October 9th, that we would be flexible and work with you in case a parent changed their mind as more information unfolds.
That's fair. Thank you.
Our next question is from Sarah Hammer.
Hello, thank you so much. I have a first grader that is at Scott. First, I really just wanted to say thank you. I think you guys are doing a great job, not only really working to support our kids, but also all of the staff that is in that school building. So the only question I have is about parent training. Will parents have the opportunity to be trained or watch a class or something like that on the platforms that will be used, just so that we are able to help our younger kids?
Thanks, Sarah. And yes, our goal is to have that parent-student training for Google Classroom and other tech needs before the school year begins. The dates of that will be released here in the coming week or so. And we want our parents to feel equipped, understanding this is a very difficult predicament to put them in and try to engage in Google Classroom and different platforms. So we want to be as consistent as possible, but we also want to provide that training for our families as well, so that they feel comfortable. So when we do the material pickup and the device pickup and the meet the teacher, we hope to also hold some type of tech training at that time, to go through what, how to access these resources and how to operate within this environment.
Okay, and I know I said I had one question, but I do have one more. If we select hybrid, can you explain how the teachers will be able to teach children on Monday, Tuesday, and then also Thursday, Friday, but then the kids that are home will be able to access remotely? Is it a live stream situation, or how will that, or will they be assigned another teacher to answer their questions remotely? I don't understand how that works.
Yeah, and those are some of the details that we're still working on. It actually goes back to our last question from Stacy Grana.
Okay.
That is a challenge. There's no doubt about it. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, different sets of classrooms and a different group of students. It may be virtual only in the Titan Cyber Academy. We're still working out the details for what that would look like in that environment, and how a teacher would manage all those different aspects of in-person instruction and virtual instruction.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Our next question is from Joel Wilson.
Hey, thank you for taking my question. The first question I have is quite simple. Is the elementary session going to be basically the same as this?
Yes.
Okay. The other two questions, well, one's a comment, one's a question. The other one is a little bit more complicated. What kind of oversight of instruction will there be? Just from my own experience, I noticed that a lot of the feedback that my child was receiving was basically, good job, good job, good job. There was no sort of insightful feedback, or coming from an educational background myself, no sort of formative feedback being provided, just sort of like copy and paste responses.
Yeah. Joel, that's been something that we've been talking about for several months now, and the standardization of this process, and ensuring that if your child gets this teacher, the experience isn't radically different than if your child gets that teacher. And so there is a level of accountability that our principals and teachers are going to be working together to ensure that there's responsiveness, good feedback, good instruction, best practice. There's formative assessment, as you've mentioned, checking for understanding, so that there's not just kind of like this notion of like, check you did it, or check you did not, or minus you did not. So that's why we think grading is imperative. That's why we think assessments are imperative. That's why we think that having as close to a normal experience as possible with synchronous and asynchronous options available will be very helpful to our students and families. So we recognize that there's considerable room for improvement in this area from the spring to the fall. A lot of what we focused on back in the spring was just giving students work and instruction that would provide, fill some of the gaps, and we didn't want it to be completely wasted time. That's why we went to more of a non-graded environment, but the expectation now moving forward is going to be, we're going to be doing school. There's going to be structure, there's going to be teaching, there's going to be assessment, and I think all those things will bring a level of accountability and standardization to the classroom.
Okay. And then the suggestion I had followed up from the previous comment regarding the model of Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. A friend of mine is an instructor in Hampton, and she was facing that same challenge, how to present the material that would be the same. And having taught online for 15 years, this is what I do for a career, not looking at it as a Thursday and Friday is the same material. It's being taught in person and online. So in other words, teachers would plan 3 online days and 2 separate, so that students who aren't in class would not be expected to operate on the same schedule as those who are actually physically in class. I don't quite understand why there would be an assumption that those two could be doing the exact same thing at the same time. Does that make sense?
It does. And we're working out the details for that and trying to understand too that, you know, some of our teachers are driven by perfection. And that if it could become all consuming to the extent that they could be working, you know, 15, 16 hours a day trying to meet everybody's individual needs. So we've got to figure out some of the things that you've just talked about there as far as what hybrid instruction, the blending of instruction could look like in an effective manner.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. So I think, you know, in my experience, 2 synchronous and 3 asynchronous days would work far better to use, you know, the appropriate language versus, you know, two in-person synchronous and then 2 online synchronous, which would obviously create technological impossibilities for parents as well as for teachers for that matter. But thank you for taking the questions.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you. Our next question is from Sean C.
Yeah, good morning. Mine's like a 3-part question, all dealing with the same thing. So I'm looking at the FAQ under transportation, and it's saying school buses can operate with a maximum of 2 students per seat. So my question is, if they're required to practice social distancing in school, how is it different from practicing on the bus? And then on top of that, it says that the bus drivers will be required to only wear a mask or shield when students enter and exit the bus, but may choose to wear a mask any other time. I don't understand if my 6-year-old has to wear a mask the whole time on the bus and why the bus driver doesn't. And then also, how do we expect the bus driver that is operating a vehicle to be able to limit these kids and not switching seats and putting more kids in each seat and making sure they wear their mask at all times? And then it also says that you guys will assign seats. So that 3-part question, you know, with lastly being the assigned seats, like who chooses the assigned seat? How do I know my kid's not going to get stuck with somebody he doesn't know and be uncomfortable on the bus?
Yeah, the transportation issues and concerns are probably some of our greatest concerns. So I think that the first part is, the first question you asked is how can we put 2 students per seat? The goal was very early on when we released our tentative plan is that we would have the option of doing that in as safe as manner as possible, understanding that there's no way, I don't know how we can transport, even if there's typically 55 students on a school bus run, to transport, you know, 27, 28 students socially distanced. So we're going to have to be creative with the seats. The assigned seats are important. If there was an issue with, you know, relationship or, you know, some concern with, you know, who a student was assigned with or around, we can certainly work with that. The expectation would be when the students are on the bus, the driver would have a mask or a shield on. So that would be the expectation. Now, managing that for our students is definitely a concern. How, you know, if the driver's watching the road, how is he or she able to see 100% of the time if students are keeping their masks on? And, you know, there's a layer of concern with the transportation, you know, that we're still working through. Because, you know, we had a transportation committee with the task force and have tremendous detailed information around safely transporting students. But the whole distancing piece is still something that we don't know how that we're going to socially distance according to what the CDC has recommended. Again, we're still working on that. And then, Sean, I wish I had better answers as to having more school buses. I mean, we have concerns about the drivers' health and safety. I mean, more of our drivers are up in that range where, you know, they're a little bit more vulnerable. So that's a concern as well too. So we're working through the details of that. And we've spent a tremendous amount of time this summer on those concerns. But again, one of the main reasons why we don't believe that we can keep students safe is the transportation issue and concern.
Thank you. And I just, my point is that it puts a lot of, you know, hardship on the bus drivers to be able to try to drive a bus and then also monitor, you know, a number of kids, you know, so at the earliest at age 5 to wear a mask and social distance or whatever. But I appreciate you taking the question. Thank you.
Our next question comes from Colleen Zalewski.
Hi. I had a couple of questions. One was regarding the iPad distribution, talking about the one-to-one tech. Even if we submitted out the commitment form that we didn't need tech, would we be considered in receiving that one-to-one tech? And would that tech or iPad already be set up, uploaded? I'm thinking specifically for the K through 3, with the apps needed for the teachers to run their school day, with the child's email address for them to email the teachers the assignments or questions if they had it, and maybe an attendance app or something. I know there was problems with the attendance working correctly when we finished up in the spring.
Sure. Thanks, Colleen. And Dr. O'Black, I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind taking the tech question.
Sure, Mr. Aiken. So no matter what response you provided, we will be issuing a district-owned iPad to every student K through 12. That decision was recently made, and our iPads do come configured. There will be some individual setup that has to occur at the pickup location relative to that, and our iPads are all managed centrally, so we will have the ability to install apps that are required by our teachers and approved by our staff. In terms of the attendance portal piece of it, we more than likely will be using a similar model for tracking student attendance, just for state purposes, but also, you know, a lot of that work is going, or attendance is going to be tracked by the completion of work and assignments as well. So looking at a similar model for taking student attendance.
Okay, great. Part of my question then, my next question would be, how have we been prepping the teachers, I guess, to move to more of a remote or virtual learning? I know you guys have talked about it extensively, but like, I guess I'm worried about what preparations have the teachers made, knowing that it, especially for this age group, it's extremely difficult for these children just to learn by looking at a computer screen and then completing a worksheet and then being graded on that. I mean, it's well known that these kids are in this age group are virtual learners. They need to touch things. They need to actually see things being done.
Yeah. Colleen, I think that's a very important question, and one that our principals were having a conversation about on Thursday. So we recognize that our students at the K3 level need to be hands-on. And so there can't be 6.5 hours of tech looking at an iPad. So that's important to note. The teaching staff had pretty much a crash course this spring and probably learned a great deal along the way, what works and what doesn't work. And I think that there's been you know, some experimentation and collaboration. I think though that they've also had the summer to kind of think about what went well, what didn't go well, and where do they need to kind of strengthen and put some new tools in their tool belt. And I think that moving into this school year, there's some professional development and webinars and some different trainings that have been offered and that are going to be required by our staff. And so there's a level of, I would say, growth and strengthening across the board. that we're going to see, the needs being met. But I say all that to say, kind of going back to the first thing I said, is we recognize though that our primary students need to be touching and feeling and learning. They don't need to be just solely sitting on an iPad, watching a video or doing some type of computer program. So I think it's important to find the perfect balance between the two.
My last one is really just a comment, well, two comments. One, I want to thank the school district. I think you guys have done a tremendous job of keeping the parents informed via sending emails, sending the voicemails, whatnot, through everything, just keeping us up to date. And I hope that that continues. But my second would be, it was a piggyback comment on a comment, I didn't write down the name, that a mother had said earlier, with maybe making it available that the teachers don't send the assignments on Monday morning. We were getting some of the assignments at 7:30, 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning. As a family with 2 working essential workers, we were already out the door. Our kids were already under childcare or other situations. So it wasn't a day lost, but they didn't have all the worksheets to complete those assignments. So we kind of need that by Sunday or Saturday.
Thanks, Colleen. I actually made a note of that, and how helpful that would be for our family. So we're going to be looking at that and try to find a way to help our parents out and families out with that information coming a little bit earlier for them. So thank you, though, for sharing that.
Thank you, guys.
Sure.
Thank you. Our next question is from Colton.
Yes, thank you. So I agree with our gentleman from the School of Medicine. We have a lot of good data from other countries. What we don't have are the unknown effects, health effects, and societal effects of our children, especially this age group, K through 3. We're talking things like social development, developmental delays, behavioral patterns and problems, effects of screen time, potential for child abuse in the home, nutrition, parents not working. So I guess my point behind this is, we have good data from the other side, but we don't know what this virtual learning will facilitate. And I think that's a major worry. And I think that's something that should be considered heavily. The numbers for COVID-19, I'm also in the medical field, they're going to continue to climb. They're not going to come down anytime soon. Children are at risk for this multi-system inflammatory syndrome, but really it's quite rare when you look at the total incidence of that disease. And like our gentleman from the School of Medicine mentioned, flu is more impactful on children at this point. I think if you use proper PPE in the facilities, other large systems are keeping the COVID numbers down, especially hospital systems where, there's lots of people interacting in the hallways, the lunchrooms, patient rooms, and COVID is not, being contracted at those locations unless there's direct care for a COVID positive patient. So I guess my whole point of this would be to secure the agency or consultants, medical consultants that, are accurate and consider opening up, in-person learning for our children, as it's immensely critical.
Colton, first of all, I want to just thank you, for sharing your concerns. And we do recognize that, there are some other states and other countries that have done this well, and, have, maintained, a healthy, low numbers. And that's, I think with compliance and education, and looking around us, to see what works and doesn't work, I think it's important. And trust me when I say that we recognize too how important it is to get our students back into a school environment as soon as possible.
I guess my point is, you mentioned that this is for the safety and well-being of the students and staff. I guess I question that, whether it is the proper decision for the safety and well-being of the students and staff. I mean, when you consider all the other adverse effects that potentially could happen through virtual learning.
And I think, Colton, that's actually where I was going, is that the social and emotional piece is huge. And I don't pretend to think that virtually we can meet the same needs that exist in our students as we would be in person. And there's a reason why they come to us and engage with us, and the connections, the relationships, the mental health. There's a huge concern that we have around this issue of the social and emotional wellness of our students. And in this virtual environment, we're going to do everything that we can possibly do to make those connections and to fill some of those gaps. And we recognize too that there's abusive situations and there's malnourishment and other concerns that are significant. So yes, we've got to break down those walls and figure out how do we do this in this environment and still meet the needs, the mental health and the anxiety and everything related to the social and emotional needs that need to be met in a virtual environment, which is challenging, no doubt. But we're going to do everything we can. We have the resources through our counselors, through our social workers, through our teachers, and we've got all work together to make sure that we are filling those gaps. And you're right, it's a very difficult situation. We could throw the students back into school and do our very best to create that type of environment in a traditional setting that we've talked about. But we think that the health factors are too great a risk at this time. But within 4 weeks, we hope that will change. And, we'll continue to look specifically at these social and emotional needs.
All right, thank you for the time. I know others want to get in, so.
Mr. Aiken, I believe we have time for one more question today, and that will go to Alyssa.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I know it was said previously that if we decided on the 100% virtual, we'd have to stick it out for the first 9 weeks. And I'm a little worried now. The commitment forms are due this week and school won't be starting for about 2 more months if we end up going to the hybrid. If we do select the 100% virtual on the commitment form, are we going to be stuck in it? I know you kind of said they were going to be flexible.
Okay. Alyssa, we're going to be as flexible as we can possibly be. So if a parent like yourself decides, I'm going to check the box now for Titan Cyber Academy, and let's say, September 15th, you change your mind, we're going to work with you to get your child into the hybrid model on October 9th. And again, this is going to be as flexible as possible for our families, recognizing that these are ever-changing and very uncertain times. And you may, a work situation may change, or, something may change at home where you need your child to go into a hybrid or traditional model. We recognize that. And so we want to be flexible.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure. One more question. I know you said the rosters would be assigned shortly. So if everyone's virtual the first 4 weeks, are they going to be assigned a specific teacher? And then would they be switching teachers after that first 4 weeks,
No.
depending on if you selected hybrid or 100% virtual? I just don't want to be flip-flopping different teachers.
That consistency and relationship is so important. So it's extremely important we connect them with that teacher at the beginning of the year, and that teacher would maintain that class roster for the entire year.
Okay, perfect. Good to know. All right, that's all. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I know there's probably others that want to ask other questions, and I apologize, but we've got our elementary school meeting here at 12 o'clock. If you have other questions, feel free to email either myself or Dr. O'Black or one of the school principals, your school principal, and we can certainly get back in touch with you. We don't mind having a phone conversation or an email communication back and forth. Also, just wanted to state that be looking for the information regarding the orientations and the other Zoom calls that will be specific to the building level. And those meetings should be very helpful as well. I just want to thank you for your patience. I realize these are difficult times and difficult questions that we have, but we're going to continue to work together through this and partner with you as best as we possibly can, whether we're in a virtual environment, hybrid environment, or traditional environment. So I just want to thank you.